I want to say good morning and welcome everybody to today's Mission Control Breakfast Brief, which is titled Redefining Your Culture for the Transformational Workplace. My name is Neil Fleischman and I'll be your host this morning. By day, I'm the area president for Payday, the leading provider of payroll and employee benefit solutions. But my passion is being an advocate for the nonprofit community. I've been involved with the Queens Botanical Garden for the past 7 years, serving as a trustee, treasurer, and eventually board chair. I also serve on the nonprofit committee for the Queens Chamber of Commerce. And lastly, I'm a proud founding member of Mission Control. Mission Control is a nonprofit think tank comprised of business professionals dedicated to the success of the nonprofit community and their missions. Our members consult and provide valuable services to help nonprofits operate more effectively and efficiently. We host breakfast briefs like this, master classes, as well as other events to stimulate and engage nonprofit executives who are dedicated to positive impact. I encourage you to all visit our website and get to know our members, which you'll see on our screen in a minute. The website's missioncontrolny.com. They're a fabulous group of dedicated people to this space, and there could be incredible resources for everyone. So I really encourage you to visit and get to know some of our members. So on to today and why we're here. This year has been a trying time for nonprofits as they try to figure out what their return to office plan looks like. Should we demand everybody back to the office? Should we let everyone stay at home? Or do we move to a hybrid model with some at the office and others at home? Most have wrestled with this for months, sometimes feeling overwhelmed and confused since there's been a lack of guidance from everybody and anybody, including government agencies. One thing that's fallen through the cracks is how all of this affects the culture of your organization. You've all worked hard over the years to create an organization where people want to work, but many have lost sight of why people like working there. How your employees feel about where they work directly affects their productivity. We're fortunate today to have a special guest with us, Dr. Lisa DeRoche, Chief People Officer for Ascend Charter School, and soon to be, she's currently Vice Chair, but soon to be Board Chair of Girls Inc. Long Island. So Lisa, would you mind introducing yourself?
Not at all. Thank you so much, Neil. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. I say, and I'll continue to say, I commend you and Mission Control for your work, to network and collaborate and share with your nonprofit peers. It's a wonderful opportunity. So I was connected to you through my Girls Inc. of Long Island board role and our wonderful executive director, Renee Flagler, who I can never say, too many good things about. Currently the vice chair of the board, as you mentioned, and, we're working with Girls Inc., providing programming to young girls in the Long Island school district area in the form of, lots of education and, coaching and counseling on a variety of issues. And we're out here, ensuring that they know to be strong, smart, and bold, right? And in addition to my board role, I recently, as you noted, took on the inaugural role as the Chief People Officer for the Ascend Public Charter School. Ascend operates 15 K through 12 charter schools in the central Brooklyn area, and they're anticipating expansion over the next few years. So I will be charged with supporting that growth while also combining the HR and talent functions, which were historically separate entities. So I'm excited about that. But prior to joining Ascend, I spent a short time in the child welfare industry at JCCA. I also spent some time in healthcare with the health plan Fidelis Care and within community health centers at Bright Point Health. And then finally, most of my career, 15 years of which was spent in financial services with a large life insurance and annuity firm. Many may know it, AXA Equitable. I do have my PhD in business with a human resources specialization because I consider myself to be a lifelong learner And ultimately, my first real job, though, was in the airline industry as a customer service rep. Some of you might remember and recall this airline, Tower Airlines, which is where I learned the true art of human service. So thank you, Neil, for having me.
Great. I'm really excited to have you here today, and I hope everybody enjoys our discussion. Before we start, I just want to encourage you, if you have any questions along the way, please post them in the chat. And once we're done with the presentation, we'll try to address as many of those as we have time for. So, so Lisa, I feel like so many organizations, I talk to my nonprofit clients and connections all the time, and a lot of them feel like they've lost touch with their employees, right? For the past 18 months, most of them have been working away from the office. Some have started to come in. But it's really been challenging for these organizations to really stay in touch with people. You know, they really need to think about what it was that originally attracted them to their particular nonprofit that they're working, and then why have they stayed? So in this environment, how do you assess and improve your corporate culture?
Yeah, that's a great question, Neil. Thanks for that. I say every now and again, you know, you have to take the pulse of your organization. You know, just like you go to the doctor for your annual checkup to see that everything is going well. You know, what do? They're taking your blood pressure, your blood work, they're running some tests, you know, and doing what they do to make sure that everything is operating the way that it should. You know, so should HR and leaders from your organizations check in and see how things are going, because there's so much happening in the world, you know, both on a global macro level and then at home in everyone's daily lives on a micro level. Things are changing, you know, so much and so rapidly. So one day you feel stable, you love your job and you're operating on all cylinders. And then the next day, you know, you name it, a parent has passed away, your child is sick, or you end up in, you know, something like a divorce, right? And things feel unsettled. Not to mention, you know, what we're talking about today, this pandemic and the way of the world, you know, changing for everyone. And what happens is, you know, everything gets turned upside down and you say to yourself, how does that make you feel? So I read a survey recently that said 69% of US workers reported that the coronavirus pandemic is the most stressful time of their entire professional career, more so than any other tragedy like 9/11 and the 2008 recession. And as you all may know, about 3.6 million people quit their jobs recently in May, and they're calling it the Great Resignation, right? Not to be confused with the Great Pumpkin. I keep I keep dating myself, but you know, this one is real. This one is not like the Great Pumpkin. This one is real. So, you know, look, I was one of those people who made a switch in jobs recently, right? The pandemic has forced people to rethink what work really means to them and what it means to be valued, right? And how they want to create value in the world. So with all that, you know, stress in the universe, it can certainly affect, you know, how you feel about your work, your employer, your boss, your coworkers. So I certainly recommend that organizations check in with their people. And excuse my puppy. Oh my goodness. you know,
I think he has something to say. He might want to chime in. Yeah, I think he might have an opinion on this.
I tell you, he's backing me up. He's saying, yes, you're saying the right thing, Mom. Well, you know, you can do a formal check-in, and I say it's either through a questionnaire or survey, you know, more formally or informally. You can talk to your people by having regular or random check-ins with your staff. Ask them how they're doing, right? Ask them if anything is interfering with their ability to do their best work. And possibly even other questions, something lighter. You know, what is their ideal weekend? Get to know people a little bit better and how they feel about other particular things going on in the office. Ask them about plans that you're, you know, putting together and see how people might feel about them. So just a couple of things I would point out. They may seem, you know, simplistic, but you'll be surprised how many times we, just take action and not consider, how the people around you on your teams might feel about it.
Right. No, I think that's great advice, especially, for some of the smaller organizations that are challenged administratively to tackle all these things. And sometimes just simply putting together a survey can really give them a lot of information in a simple, easy format. So I think that's really valuable for them to try.
And you don't even have to create it yourself. There's so many out there, right? The internet is just a loom of information, as well as the networks that you all have. I'm sure that someone else has done a survey that you could take and make your own, So don't always, look to reinvent the wheel.
Right. That's great advice. And another topic I know a lot of people struggle with right now is policies. And everybody's been faced with this situation that we've all never been in before. And having clear policies, I think, are extremely important, probably now more than ever, because there's so many changes that affect this physical back to the office environment. So could you talk a little bit about how you can or should navigate creating and implementing new policies?
Yeah, so, the first thing that comes to mind for me right now, Neil, is, given the rising numbers in cases caused by the Delta, variant, which, as you know, is this highly contagious strain of, the virus. Our companies have to be committed to taking all the necessary precautions to keep staff and our clients and our community safe, right? And it's best to have up to date HR policy guides or manuals ready, available for staff. I've found that there are many organizations, and I've come into them, whereas they haven't touched updating their policies in such a long time. And that's because it gets overwhelming. And I recognize that. I'm the person in my role who owns, the HR policy manual. And I think it's a priority that we always have someone who is in charge of ensuring that they stay up to date, because it's like the Bible of how you operate in your organization. And if you want to drive a particular culture where everyone is kind of operating off of the same instructions and guidance, you have to be clear about what your expectations are in the workforce. So ensuring that there's someone who owns the policy manual, as well as even with keeping those policies in place, I would recommend your HR and or legal departments and or those skilled to prepare and, create these policies also facilitate discussions for, management and employees on briefings on these policies on a regular basis. So when things are changing, don't just, which is in addition to updating, revising, and rolling it out to staff on email or however you communicate, putting things on intranets or what have you, take the time to, do a briefing for your staff and have them allow the opportunity for questions so that you can clarify and be clear about what some of these policies mean, because it's pretty daunting, right? And some of the terminology and policies can be so overwhelming, and there's always gray when you create these documents. So you want to make sure that it's as clear as possible for them. But those are some of the things I would say, and of course have them readily accessible, as I said.
Right. Well, totally connected to policies, and probably one of the most controversial policies that people are going to set in this revolves around vaccination. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a scary topic. It's a confusing topic, especially because there's so little guidance around it. Right? People, can you force your work staff to get vaccinated? Can you threaten them with their job if they don't get vaccinated? Right? Can you create different rules for different people about vaccination, whether it's based because they have religious beliefs or whatever it is? So how do you deal with that?
This is the $64,000 question, right? in the environment right now, right? So let me, I guess, put out my my formal statement. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention strongly encourage all eligible residents in the United States to get vaccinated against COVID-19, right? And it has stated that the COVID-19 vaccines are available, safe, and effective. However, many people are still fearful, right? So I would always recommend checking with, your legal counsel on this topic, since, legally employers can mandate, but individuals can also be, eligible for certain religious or medical exemptions. And, whatever it is that you care about as an organization, you have to determine whether or not you want to bring that as a requirement to your culture, right? The culture and what you do and the policies you drive speak to who you are as an entity and who you want the outside world to see the kind of, group that you are, right? So there are a few sides to this coin. If you do mandate vaccines, are you prepared for staff to separate from the company if they choose to do so? So that's something that you have to think about. We've heard this all in the news recently. I'm sure you're all, following this. For New York City, restaurant, bars, indoor venues, they're going to face fines up to $5,000 if they don't require patrons to show proof of vaccine under executive order by de Blasio, right? So this is all coming to a head, that people are being put in a position to have to force decisions one way or the other. And there's a lot of pressure out there about this. I think this is another area, and it may be late, but if you haven't done it yet, this is another area where surveys have been helpful in asking why staff wouldn't get vaccinated, and providing solutions to help educate and, possibly change their minds. And I say educate and possibly change their mind versus forcing, because this is a time where empathy is more important than anything else right now, right? So no matter what you do, you want to, be cautious in ensuring that you're sensitive to people on both sides of the coin, because it's become such a harsh political debate, which I wish it hasn't gone that way. We have to come back to the heart of who we are as people in our organizations and what we want to do for our staff, right? But again, tracking vaccination, also a tricky topic. How will you collect the information, ensuring that you're protecting, individuals' personal health information? Again, it's really, really not an easy roadmap to maneuver at this point. But look at your industry, ensure you aren't doing anything illegal or immoral. And, I always say, seek out legal counsel. These are my friends in HR. So I am constantly, consulting with those individuals in my environments to support, what we need to do. And, some feel, just on another point of that, some feel that if you mandate vaccine, it's discriminatory, right? And, it depends on who you ask if you believe that that is the case. But when you're being forced to do something that you're not comfortable with, for whatever reason, it has a sting that doesn't always sit right for some people. So you have to think about that, and maybe put yourself in the shoes of that person. If it were something that you weren't comfortable with, how would you want someone to interact with you in a case like this? And I know that this is a health issue that could result in, the illness of others around you, but still put yourself in the shoes of the other who may be truly fearful.
Right. Yeah. Employees, or people in general, but we're talking about nonprofits and their employees. One of the things I think that's been really overlooked in this is wellness and staff wellness, right? You talked about how stressful just even this vaccination issue can be for people who, haven't gotten vaccinated yet, thinking about it, not sure. But in general, over the last 18 months, there's been a lot of stress put on everybody. Physical stress, certainly emotional stress, even financial stress. People have been through a lot through this. So how do you shift focus to be sympathetic, empathetic to your staff and what they've gone through, and more importantly, make them feel like that matters, or they matter, and their feelings matter, their anxieties about coming back to work, if you're forcing them to come back to the office, all these things matter. How do you convey that?
Right. Oh my gosh, this is such a good question, Neil. I come back to, asking the questions of your staff to target what their needs are. However, you must know that you can't please everyone all the time, right? We know that saying. I think it's, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. It's an old saying. However, if you show that you're sensitive to their needs and attempt to do things that may influence and support, let's say, the majority, this is important, right? And, for those who you can't, bring along, continue to, reach out to them and, ensure that they understand that you are thinking of them as well. In my last organization, I'll give you an example. We were working on building a culture of wellness, right, at JCCA. And we created a survey to ask them what was important to them. The survey was run about 3 years ago, the initial survey, and then again this past spring, right before I left. Surprisingly, the results in both surveys, even though the time difference, had a whole pandemic in the process, the results were the same, okay? The staff were asked about a variety of wellness categories, and of a group of about 700, the top 4 reasons of concern for them were: number one, finances. Number one, and you alluded to this earlier, Neil, 49.7%, yes, and this is a form of wellness. People are not healthy if they're constantly worried about their financial health. That was the number one answer, right? Healthy eating was the second most popular answer for this group. Stress management, number 3, which surprised me. I would have thought stress would have been number 1, right? But sure. No, it's finances. Let's not forget that. The almighty dollar, right, makes this world go round. And then finally, women's health. And we, we're an organization, majority of women, so that didn't surprise me either. But, that wasn't the top category of concern. But based on all of this, we worked on targeting ways in which we could help expose, staff to these items. For example, offering total rewards programs related to their own benefits. You don't know how many people do not understand their benefits. And this is something that they use, possibly on a regular basis or only when they need it, but they may not recognize how influential their benefits are to their livelihood. So I would always recommend, at least twice a year, not just at open enrollment time, remind people of all the nuances within their benefits. Pay is one part and one aspect of their work life, but it's not the only aspect. And give them opportunities for them to save money. Teach them more about their 403B. Just offering them those resources. And again, at times they forget what they have. There's so many benefits that I think we offer that we're, leaving to the wayside, and we shouldn't, because benefits are very expensive for the organization. And if the individuals are not utilizing it, it's costing the firm money as well.
That's a great point, because after the cost of payroll, usually the cost of providing benefits to your employees is the next biggest expense for a nonprofit. Right.
So, that's absolutely right. And half the time you'll find out that people don't even know that they have a particular benefit, or if they have it, they don't know how it works and how to use it.
No, that's all great advice. Some of the things you touched on relate to also the comfort level that are creating more comfort for people, especially the ones that have to return to work. There's got to be a lot of anxiety associated with that. For the people who have to come back to the office, they haven't been to the office in 18 months. And it's kind of weird the way us human beings work. So it's something we've done all our lives. you can't do it for 18 months. And now somebody tells you you have to do it. And it's incredible how easily we get anxious about something like that. Something as simple as going back to an office we've always gone to 5 days a week, for our entire working lives. So how do you make people feel comfortable, and also just just recognizing that they might feel that way will help people feel more comfortable. But how do you go about that?
Right. So, in a time of a pandemic, this is tricky, right? Since businesses are navigating, guidelines from health organizations such as the CDC and, the New York City Department of Health, or Nassau County, Suffolk County, wherever you are, all these local and state government entities, lots to navigate and very complicated. The important thing to do, I think, is certainly follow those guidelines, right? But also make them relevant for your own environment, right? These guidelines that are put out there, they have a certain picture in mind. That may not be the exact opportunity that your environment can offer. So you want to be able to, taper them to meet the needs of your organization, right? One example is the conversation around remote work, right? So when I worked with, JCCA, half of our staff supported our residential campus that housed 200 young people. These jobs are social workers, technology, food service workers, some jobs that are not able to go remote, right? So how can you accommodate everyone to work remotely if their jobs just don't allow for this benefit, right? So in what ways can you make the remote work practice feasible and beneficial for both the person and the organization where you can? Remote work is just one example, right? In the school system, and many of, I think, your partners are familiar with this. And if you're not someone who works in the system, you either have had kids go through the system, family members, what have you. Either way, how can you accommodate remote work again for teachers when their roles require them to be in the classrooms, right? So yes, others in the corporate office have different roles and are not required to be face-to-face with, students and clients or what have you. You can offer other benefits, and should consider offering other benefits to those who can't, work remote. But, what you want to also consider is the safety of the environment as you bring people back. Cleaning protocols and things of that nature. Set up a culture that everyone recognizes that now that we're back in, you're responsible for cleaning up your own space, right? If you're in a meeting and you decided that even if you're socially distanced, whatever the amounts are, 3 feet, 6 feet, some people have larger spaces than others. So you can,
Right.
socially distance in a safe way. Make sure that people are cleaning up after their own space when they use it. The organization should also ensure that they provide cleaning supplies and sanitizing wipes and dispensers with hand sanitizer. Create a culture of cleanliness, because I found that the amount of times that we're washing our hands now and being clean, there are no other, like, who's getting colds anymore? Nobody's getting a cold anymore because we're like really focused on cleanliness. So I think that that's important. And, thinking through what your process is, as I mentioned, for meeting density. In the past, I know in my environments where I've worked, there have been places where people are sharing office spaces. And now you have to be a little bit more conscious of that. Can we still continue to do that? And obviously there are layers to it now. Are you vaccinated? Are you not vaccinated? Are you comfortable sharing an office space now because you're vaccinated? What about the people who are not, or who have not shared that they're vaccinated? It gets more and more complicated. So you just have to ask these questions, as well as a point that I think also, and I'll make this finally, that goes unrecognized, is that what about all the new people, that you bring into the environment? Are they aware of all of your processes so that they can participate in following in the guidelines and feel that they are being included as well, right? So you have your group of people who've been around for a while, they get it, they know all the right places and things to do. How are you bringing your new hires into the fold as well, and understanding all of your protocols? So those are the things I would mention quickly.
Right. A big part of corporate culture, at least especially in the last decade, was, teamwork building or sense of community within organizations. And that was always fairly easy to do because everybody was in the same place all the time, right? And it was something that employees usually really enjoyed doing. So now that your team's not going to be together all the time, or most probably won't be, most companies I think are initially starting with some kind of hybrid model. How do you accomplish, creating that sense of community again, or with a teamwork or team building concept? And is it important?
Oh my gosh, yes, it's very important, right? So I heard this is a way to identify a hybrid environment when you're addressing them in classrooms, right? Where some young people may be remote, you would call them Zoomies, right? And in the other, and others in the room who you might be live with face to face, you call them your roomies, right? So the Zoomies and the roomies, consider referring to them as such when making introductions at the beginning of a meeting to acknowledge where everyone is at the moment, right? So you want to do introductions. I would always suggest introductions for new meetings or big meetings so that people, can say who they are and tell a little bit about themselves, maybe a fun fact or what have you. That tends to bring people together a little bit and they get to know each other a little bit more. You may do this now, but offer check-ins before starting the meetings. Ask 3 questions. This is something that I've done in my work environment based on some culture training that we've been building on for many years now. And it's 3 simple questions. How are you feeling? Most importantly. Number 2, do you have any interferences? And 3, a brief question to get to know each other better. It can go quickly. You don't have to respond to everything someone's saying. You just give them a chance to, speak about themselves and move on to the next one. And it really builds camaraderie. Another idea is to partner folks, especially new folks. And I mentioned this earlier, your new hires are really important to pay attention to. Partner folks with a buddy. It's hard to start at a new place if you don't know anyone. Connect them with others who know the ropes, as well as people who've been around. Sometimes engagement, gets low and you want to re-engage and bring them back, up to their level of performance that they've, been at in the past. Sometimes, start meetings with music. I mean, music is the universal sound for people, right? I know we don't think to do this in our environments because we're corporate and we're busy and we're trying to get things done all the time, right? It's now time for us to slow down a bit and encourage and engage people to feel wanted in their environments. Start with some music. Let someone, every time you have a meeting, let someone pick their favorite song, and then you get to know people that way. One day it's rock and roll and the next day it's hip hop. Why not? Let's engage with each other and spend some fun time. It could be 5 minutes and then dig into the work. And you will not believe how much energy that brings to the table, right?
Yeah.
Couple of quick tips.
Yeah, simple and easy things for people to accomplish for sure.
Absolutely.
So I got one more question, and it's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, especially during my time as board chair at Queens Botanical, and that's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's been so many, decisions that companies are making, and we talked about policies before as an example. So you're creating and setting new policies all over the place. And sometimes that can make people feel like they've been left out, or maybe there's some policies that make people feel like they're being treated differently than others. So how do you take that into consideration and then implement something so you can plan properly for addressing this with your employees?
It's a great question, and I know we're getting close to time, but this is a big one. This is a sensitive one, right? So diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also a new term gaining, traction within corporations now is becoming an anti-racist culture, right? This is not a new effort, right? Depending on the maturity of your organization, DEI and DEIA and, what have you, however you term it, has been an effort on the agenda of many large corporations like AXA that I had been a part of for 15 years, and places like Chase as examples. They've been doing this work for many, many years. It's not just new work in the George Floyd era, right? It depends on the size of your organization, what your mission is, et cetera. But there are also places, like I've mentioned, JCCA, Habitat for Humanity, and some of your own, organizations at Mission Control who've been thinking about this and doing work in this area for a while as well. So as organizations, when you're considering new programs and processes, one of the things I would say, and it's been pointed out to me by the diversity experts in the field that I know, is to always ask yourself, who might be excluded when you think of creating a new program or process? Who is it targeted for, and who might be excluded? And think about how you want that to, enter into the culture. For example, from a recruitment standpoint, if we're only recruiting at specific schools for say, general skills, ask why and who might be missing, right? And another example is when preparing for, promotion conversations. What practices are you creating that keeps everyone thinking inclusively about who to consider for more responsibilities, right? And then also, I would also question, assumptions and initial reactions to things. For example, when I'm evaluating someone for performance, ask yourself, am I seeing them unfavorably because they have a different style than me? Or is it because literally they're actually not demonstrating the needed competencies for, the role and what you need them to do? So one other point, which I think is really important, is consider consulting with or hiring facilitators who are well-versed in this work, right? Who can help to educate leaders and staff. And then one other final point I'll make is on the concept of employee resource groups. This is another way to create ways to provide support to staff. For those of you who may not know, employee resource groups are groups of employees who join together in their workplaces based on some shared characteristic or life experience, and they work together to enhance career development, and they provide support to each other. At AXA, we had several employee resource groups, including a women's group, a group for African Americans, a veterans group. We even had a French employee resource group for anyone who spoke. I'm telling you this, I'm like not even making this up, for anyone who spoke French, since AXA was owned by a French parent company, right? So anyone who spoke French could join, and all the groups would collaborate with each other and offer social gatherings to share updates on their progress. And more importantly, I know it sounds like a lot of, fun, but more importantly, everything they did was connected to projects that supported the company's mission, right? That's how you bring it back to center. It's not just about who we all are. Yes, that's really important. Who you are, bringing your whole authentic self to the table at work, but then coming together and doing it all towards the mission of the organization. That's what, diversity, equity, and inclusion can be great. That's when it can be great, right? So I'll end on that because we're getting close to time, but I get excited. I'm passionate about this.
And that certainly comes through really loud and clear. Let's see if we could try to squeeze in a couple of quick questions. So I see one here. As our workforce continues to be hybrid with some working from home, what advice can you give on how we do periodic evaluations to measure or recognize any changes in culture?
Yeah, so I come back to the conversation around, the surveys, and I know it's not easy, right? But a survey doesn't have to be 10 questions. A pulse survey check can be 3 questions. You send it out through a Survey Monkey. It's quick, it's easy to turn around, and or you put individuals in the system who are big on culture, and you have them go out and talk to people. those who you know the organization and people trust, right? Because trust is a big factor when you're trying to get information. You want to have those who others trust be there for them, encouraging them, asking questions, taking what they, hear from staff and bringing it back to the leaders who make decisions. It's important for leaders to know what's going on in the operation. And what I find is that many people are, I'll keep it very, very transparent and clear. They're fearful of speaking to leadership. They believe that if they provide feedback to leadership, in some way they might be retaliated against or something. They're going to lose their jobs, right? This is a true, real fear that you all have to be aware of as a leader in an organization, right? So if you're not that person that they feel is approachable enough to get information, find the people who are. Build trust with them. Let them, offer ways that they can send information back through the system. You might even also set up, and I know you've done this, boxes where people can offer solutions and or an email that is, anonymous so that people can submit, items through email that are anonymous. Give that
like an
option.
old school suggestion box, basically.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes the old school is not as bad as it makes us out to be, right? Go back to those, grassroots examples.
100%. All right, I see one more question. In normal times, high turnover and absenteeism are clear signs of cultural issues. So based on this new work environment where everybody's God knows where, what are some of the things you should be aware of or on the lookout for as far as changes in your culture?
Well, if it relates to absenteeism, one thing we know is that absenteeism went down, right? And this is because in a remote environment, who needs to take off if they're if they're already home, right? Which you can kind of look at the other way. It's like we overworked our people because they were home, and then we never turned them off, right? It's like you're waking up, you're looking at the phone 6 a.m. and you never stop until 10 p.m. because I'm home, I might as well work. And the culture at home, as you heard and as you can imagine, actually turned upside down. How many, violent domestic violence cases were you hearing about where people were more often stuck in the home? And I don't want to end on a low note. I want to end on a high note that your people were there for you when they were working remotely almost 24 hours a day. Now you got to be, flipping it and be there for them, right? So from a culture perspective, continuing to check in, continuing to read the faces of your workers through remote if it's not in person, and see how they're doing. Sometimes you can see it on their face. You can see in how they've changed their behavior. If one person is typically talking all the time and then all of a sudden they're no longer speaking, something is not right. Something is going on, whether it's in the work or at home or whatever the case may be. So, empathy and paying attention and being sensitive to me right now is one of the top leadership behavior skills that we all should bring to the table.
Great. Well, Lisa, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and sharing your thoughts and your insights on these topics. They're really important topics for nonprofits, and everybody is sort of starving for some guidance and help and ideas surrounding these topics. So I hope everybody found this information to be incredibly as helpful as I think it is for me. So, and to our audience, again, thank you for continuing to attend our mission control events. I hope you think they're really useful in your day-to-day chores. Please keep an eye out for an invitation to our future events. I'm sure there's going to be something coming out pretty soon. So keep an eye out for your emails for that. And with that, I wish you all a great day and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.